We've all heard the saying, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From the endless fields of wheat and corn to the cattle grazing on rolling pastures, life as we know it seems to be defined by the soil. From your morning toast to that steak dinner, everything we consume feels deeply rooted in the solid ground beneath our feet. At least, that's how it looks on the surface. But there's a massive plot twist. Believe it or not, 70% of the protein humanity consumes doesn't come from the land, it comes from the ocean. It's no coincidence that history's greatest civilizations were always built by the water. We haven't just been living near the ocean, we've been powered by it. In the harsh, unforgiving landscapes of Northern Europe, this wasn't just a choice, it was a matter of survival. In a place where farming was out of question, fish became the local currency, silver of the sea. Trading fish for flour was the only way to keep the scales of life in balance. And tucked away in the most remote corner of the north, right in the heart of the Atlantic, lies an island nation, a place so cold and barren that it had to survive like a one-trick pony, betting everything on just one thing: fish. That country is Iceland. If you asked Europe what their all-time favorite fish was, the answer would be cod, alongside herring. Cod, in particular, was a total game-changer. It's delicious, packed with nutrition, and incredibly lean, making it practically the perfect fish for human consumption. With almost no natural predators besides sharks and whales, the cod population was absolutely massive, and since it's so low in fat, it was incredibly easy to dry and preserve, earning it the nickname the wheat of the sea. Iceland, an island isolated in the heart of the Atlantic, had been under Danish rule since the Viking Age. For centuries, their entire livelihood depended on one thing: catching and exporting cod. Up until the early modern era, they didn't really have any other industry to speak of. For hundreds of years, Europeans feasted on cod from the Atlantic coast, never once stopping to think, what if the fish run out? Unlike other food sources, everyone assumed the supply of cod was infinite. But then came the Industrial Revolution, and everything changed. While the Industrial Revolution caused a massive explosion in manufacturing, agricultural productivity just couldn't keep up. As a result, the working class, who could no longer survive on farming, began to flood into the cities. Populations that once lived off the land were now crammed into urban centers, factories, and mines, and they all needed to be fed. Britain, being the first to industrialize, was the first to face this food crisis, leading to a massive spike in cod consumption. The solution was to deep-fry cod in bulk and sell it as cheap, calorie-dense fuel for factory workers. This is exactly how the legendary British soul food, fish and chips, was born. But then the cod stocks, which everyone assumed were bottomless, began to vanish. I mean, it had been an all-you-can-eat buffet for nearly 1,000 years. Surely they weren't actually going to run out. Ignoring the glaring red flags that the catches were thinning out, the British kept scooping up cod like there was no tomorrow. It was only after the cod stocks in their own backyard completely bottomed out that Britain finally got a reality check. It was a massive wake-up call, albeit a very late one. But back then, who owned the world's oceans? In their minds, Britain did. Their logic was simple: if the fish weren't biting near home, they'd just head out into the deep blue. Backed by the world's most powerful navy, British fishing boats ventured deep into the Atlantic to hunt for cod. Other European nations, just as hungry for cod, soon followed suit, racing into the Atlantic. Before long, the waters off Iceland were swarming with foreign vessels. Imagine other countries throwing a massive cod party right in your own front yard. Britain, in particular, was treating the area like its own private pantry, coming and going exactly as it pleased. Finally, in 1893, Denmark, which ruled Iceland at the time, sent a formal notice to Britain. They declared that the waters up to 50 nautical miles from the coast were Icelandic territory and told the British to back off. But Britain just laughed it off. Their attitude was, who are you to tell the masters of the sea where they can fish? They fired back with a provocation, claiming they would only recognize a measly 3-mile limit from the Icelandic shore. Now, this 3-mile rule wasn't just a random number. Back then, the range of a coastal cannon was about 3 miles, so it became the unofficial self-defense zone recognized among European nations. Basically, they were telling Icelanders to stay on the beach while they claimed the entire North Atlantic for themselves. The real kicker was that Britain wouldn't even respect that tiny buffer zone. They kept intruding and scooping up cod right under Iceland's nose. The conflict really started to heat up right after the end of World War II. Just as the war was winding down, Iceland cut ties with Denmark to become a republic, while Britain and the rest of Europe were left picking up the pieces of their shattered nations. With food supplies running low and economies in the gutter, everyone was desperate for a cheap way to feed their people. And once again, Britain's go-to was cod and cod liver oil. In 1945, having emerged as the world's undisputed top dog after World War II, the U.S. dropped a bombshell, the Truman Proclamation. Before this, national borders were pretty straightforward, just the land and sea you could actually see. It was a what you see is what you get kind of world. But this proclamation was on a whole different level. Essentially, the U.S. staked a claim to everything on the continental shelf extending from its shores, marking it all as their own turf. To grab hold of massive hidden underwater resources, they started drawing a line in the sand, or rather the sea, much like the pioneers of the Wild West. Following this move, countries around the world started doing the same, and Iceland jumped into the fray, declaring it would expand its own territorial waters. They announced they were quadrupling their limit, moving from the arbitrary 3 miles set by Britain to a full 12 miles. Other countries had been fishing there too, but they mostly played fair and backed off beyond the new 12-mile mark. But the British, they basically told Iceland to deal with it and kept right on fishing. To make matters worse, the British government refused to recognize the expansion and went as far as sending in actual warships to protect their fleet. With the Royal Navy as their muscle, British fishing boats dug their heels in and kept on fishing like their lives depended on it. Then, in 1958, Iceland, a country with a coast guard that was basically just a glorified police force, decided to throw the first punch at Britain, one of the world's most formidable naval powers. An Icelandic patrol boat actually opened fire on a British vessel, warning them to back off immediately. And so began the First Cod War. There wasn't a massive body count, but make no mistake, Iceland was playing for keeps. With nothing left to lose, Iceland went all in, showing the world they were ready to take this to the bitter end. For Britain, however, deploying the actual navy just to protect some fishing boats was starting to look like a bad investment, no matter how you crunched the numbers. In this high-stakes game of chicken, it was Britain who finally blinked first after 3 long years. The UK eventually threw in the towel and agreed to recognize Iceland's 12-mile claim. In exchange, they added a clause: if another dispute broke out, it would have to be settled in the International Court of Justice. Basically, they were saying, we'll give you the 12 miles, but don't push your luck. No more backpedaling later. But just 10 years later, Iceland did exactly that. Hey, when the government changes, the rules change, right? After a political shift in 1972, Iceland announced it was massively expanding its territory again, this time to 50 miles. Britain ignored them completely, telling its fishermen to keep calm and carry on catching cod. But this time, they didn't send in the warships right away. Unlike 10 years prior, the world was now in the thick of the Cold War, with everyone trying to contain the spread of communism, engaging in friendly fire with a fellow NATO ally over a few fish seemed absurd. It would have been a total win for the Soviet Union, literally playing right into their hands. To put it in American terms, they had bigger fish to fry with the Soviets. Getting bogged down over cod would have been the textbook definition of winning the battle but losing the war. Of course, Iceland wasn't bluffing. They sent out patrol boats to hunt down British vessels and literally cut their nets right off. As the economic damage piled up, Britain felt backed into a corner and finally decided to send in the warships back in. With cod being their literal bread and butter, Iceland decided it was time for the nuclear option. They threatened to completely sever diplomatic ties with the UK, and then they dropped the real bombshell. They threatened to leave NATO altogether. This sent NATO into a panic. They rushed in to mediate, and once again, Britain was forced to back down. A deal was struck. British ships would stay outside the 50-mile limit, and their annual catch would be capped at 130,000 tons. In October 1973, the Second Cod War ended in another landslide victory for Iceland. Just a year later, in 1974, the Middle East oil shock hit, sending the European economy into a total tailspin. Iceland was facing a massive economic crisis of its own, and their solution? You guessed it, more cod. They decided to double down and expand their territorial waters yet again. In 1975, the Icelandic government dropped another bombshell, announcing they were quadrupling their limit from 50 miles to a staggering 200 miles. Now, going from 50 to 200 miles, that was definitely crossing a line. This time, Britain had enough and sent in the warships immediately. Just 2 years after the last conflict, the Third Cod War was officially on. Britain couldn't exactly start shelling a fellow ally. The optics would have been terrible, but they couldn't just stand by either. So it turned into a primal, physical brawl at sea. It was a chaotic game of maritime bumper cars with fishing boats and massive warships literally ramming into each other. Once again, Iceland threatened to sever diplomatic ties and leave NATO, essentially saying they were taking their ball and going home. They even tried to buy fast attack craft from the US, basically saying, let's settle this for all. Iceland hoped the US would take their side, forcing Britain to back off. But for the Americans, selling weapons for a fight between two of their own teammates was a hard no. They shut it down immediately. With their usual tactics failing, Iceland finally pressed the big red button, the literal nuclear option that would upend the entire status quo. In a shocking twist, Iceland turned to the Soviet Union. Ideology be damned, they were willing to hop into bed with the enemy just to protect their livelihood. It was the ultimate geopolitical gamble. This sent the Western world into full-on panic mode. The US and Western Europe were caught completely off guard. The idea of Iceland leaving NATO and arming itself with Soviet weapons right in the middle of the Atlantic was a nightmare. It would have given the Soviets free rein in the ocean, and the US simply couldn't let that happen. The message to Britain was loud and clear. Are you really gonna blow up the entire alliance over some fish and chips? Just buy the damn cod from Iceland. The international community completely turned on Britain overnight. In the end, NATO had to step in and play referee once again. But with their pride severely wounded, the British refused to back down, stubbornly continuing to fish in Icelandic waters. On February 18, 1976, their warships clashed yet again. The very next day, Iceland made a massive power move. They officially severed all diplomatic ties with the UK. It was the ultimate David versus Goliath showdown, a battle between a nation that had nothing but cod and a nation that had everything except cod. But when it came to the moral high ground and public opinion, it was a fight Britain simply couldn't win. Under heavy pressure from the US and NATO, Britain was finally forced to wave the white flag once more. A summit was held in Oslo, Norway, where the two nations finally restored diplomatic relations. However, the terms of the deal were a bitter pill for the UK to swallow. It was a humiliating agreement. Only 24 British vessels were allowed within Iceland's 200-mile zone, and their total catch was capped at a measly 50,000 tons. With cod stocks dwindling and their access strictly limited, Britain was out of options. Through these 3 Cod Wars, Iceland received a major wake-up call. They realized they couldn't bet their entire national destiny on a single fish forever. Iceland decided it was time to stop putting all their eggs in one basket. Leveraging their unique volcanic landscape, they built a massive aluminum industry using geothermal energy and transformed their breathtaking scenery into a booming tourism sector. They successfully diversified their economy by expanding into manufacturing and finance. Even the massive sci-fi hit EVE Online, which captured the hearts of gamers worldwide, stands as a symbol of this economic evolution. Of course, cod remains the heart and soul of Iceland's industry. With Atlantic cod disappearing elsewhere, they aren't about to lose the fishing grounds they fought so hard to protect. That's why they now strictly regulate every single catch to ensure their stocks remain sustainable for generations to come. We'll end today's video by reflecting on this simple truth. Whether it's fish or any other part of nature, nothing is infinite. This has been Flat Archive. Thanks for watching.